Hey eBay sellers, it's Suzanne, and I wanted to take some time in this video to talk to the sellers in rural areas. I notice on social media, both Facebook and YouTube, that the prevailing majority of sellers that are mentoring or making videos or helping other sellers are in big cities, near big cities, or have just a huge abundance of resources for getting inventory. And I understand that there are also many of you in rural areas that just don't have that luxury. So even if you're not in a rural area, some of these tips might help you in your sourcing. But I just wanted to take some time to talk to those folks that don't have the luxury of having a thrift store on every corner, 20 thrift stores in a 5 mile radius, which is true in a lot of places in the United States, but definitely not all. So the common rural seller frustration is I can't find good things to sell. And you can, it's just you have to be more creative and do it in a different way. And I think I've mentioned over the years that for several years I did online coaching, helping sellers build their eBay business. And this was a common problem. So we had to put our heads together and think of ways for the sellers living in rural areas to find good inventory to sell so they could build this business. Now, part of that was my own experience living in a rural area. And I wanted to share that with you because I understand how it is living out away from everything, whether you've done this all your life or you maybe have bought some acreage or you're going into retirement and you're going to be living out in a rural area, which is quite attractive these days because there's so many modern conveniences with internet and all of the things that are popping up that make life easier, Amazon delivering to your door every day, things like that that I didn't have when I lived in a very rural area in the 90s. So I just want to share that experience with you so you'll know that I understand those challenges. I have lived those challenges before technology and the internet became what it is today, and it's not easy, and you just have to plan for it. So in 1994, we moved to rural Tennessee from Charlotte, North Carolina. We moved to a 300-acre farm in a town of 1,600, and this was on the Cumberland Plateau. So this is kind of a picture of that area. That was not our farm, but the farm was in my ex-husband's family, and he had a job that we moved around with, so he was transferred to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and this farm was about 45 minutes from there, way up in the mountains. It was actually on top of that mountain ridge there, so we were way up in the mountains and pretty isolated from everything. So actually, when this happened, my friends and family kind of compared it to this.
Green Acres is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. Land spreading out so far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.
New York is where I'd rather stay. I get allergic smelling hay. I just adore a penthouse view. Darling, I love you, but give me Park Avenue.
The chores,
The stores,
fresh air.
Times Square.
You are my wife.
Goodbye, city life.
Green Acres, we are there.
Okay, well, it wasn't exactly like that, but that was kind of the joke we got from everybody. We weren't rich, but we wanted that experience of living in the country, and this opportunity came up. So, with a sense of adventure, we're like, yeah, let's go do it. So, the Cumberland Plateau, if you're not familiar, is in Tennessee along kind of the Appalachian area. So we were way up there on top of a mountain, and this is actually the current Google satellite photo of that area now. And the arrow is pointing to where our house was, and here it is a little bit closer up. You'll see over here on the bottom, there's another house. Now, that was there already, the house that was built in the 50s that we lived in for a year and a half while we built the other house over across the pasture there. So I got to enjoy all kinds of things regarding an older house falling down around you while you're trying to live in it, that my ex-husband's family used and still today uses as just like a little vacation getaway. They go up there and fish in that big old 12-acre pond, and my ex-brother-in-law goes up there with his friends. They go hunting and stuff like that. So very, very isolated, as you can see, and very new to us because neither of us had ever lived that way. And we moved up there when my daughter was 4 months old. So that was another challenge, being way out like that. So it was 45 minutes one way to the closest grocery store, which was either in Dayton, Tennessee, or a town called Soddy Daisy, Tennessee. And it was about an hour one way to the pediatrician, doctor's offices, anything like that. So I did my share of driving up and down that mountain quite a bit while we lived there. So this is the view from where we were up on top. Now, another challenge we had was when we moved up there in 94, they still had party lines. So you'd pick up the phone and you'd hear people talking. You had to wait your turn to make a phone call. So forget internet. We had to learn how to do all that kind of stuff. And they were just transitioning from rotary telephones to push button phones. So we went into this with a sense of adventure. I was 28 at the time, had a new baby, had just decided to be a stay-at-home mom, and left my job at Equifax. It was an office job where I was making good money and bonuses and traveling, and just completely did a 180 and had this completely different life that we embraced with a sense of adventure. So here's our house that we finally built a year and a half after we moved up there. You can see it's right on top of the mountain there. And this was all new to us. We had lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, with a population of about 1.5 million. And then Atlanta is where we were from and raised, and about 3 million people in the metro Atlanta area. So quite a culture shock to move to this little town of 1,600 people. And of course, everybody knew each other. They'd all lived there their whole lives. All the roads were named after whatever family lived on that road. So it was kind of hard being an outsider, coming there from somewhere else, because pretty much everybody there had farms. They had been there forever, and they all knew each other. So what we enjoyed so much was just the beautiful landscape. These pictures I'm showing you now were taken from our back porch. So this was, a view out over the acreage we had. Well, it wasn't ours. We were living on 100 acres of pasture and 200 acres wooded. So beautiful, beautiful views. This is the same scene in the winter. We got some snow up there. And then, the morning mist would roll in over the ponds. It was just so beautiful. In January, we were socked in with fog almost every day. It was quite depressing just to be up there and just fog. That's all it was. You couldn't see anything. But every time something interesting would happen with the weather, I'd go grab my camera. This was back when digital cameras were just getting started. Cell phones were like the little Nokia phones. It didn't even have a camera on it. So everything was film camera, develop the pictures, and of course, we're sending all these pictures through the mail to our family, showing what we're experiencing up there. So I took this picture of this cool storm rolling in one afternoon. The sunsets were just amazing. I just love, still do enjoy a beautiful sunset. So we really enjoyed the nature up there. And then again, there's the big pond. We had cows, we had cattle for a while, and got to have that experience, which was very interesting. This was the road out in the front of the house, so you can see just how gorgeous it was up there. And then the same road with snow. So I mentioned we moved up there when my daughter Melanie was 4 months old, and being a new mom and in a new location, of course I'm just taking pictures all the time, but this picture actually won first prize at the county fair the first year we lived there, so I entered it in the photography competition and actually won. So that's all our property in the back there. It was just beautiful. And here we are again with the barn. We had chickens, we had cows. We tried to have all these different experiences. And then there's the change of seasons again. That pond was stocked with all kinds of fish, bass, brim. There were turtles in there the size of, coffee tables. They were huge. They would just kind of float to the top. And so we never went swimming in that pond. There was too many crazy, scary things in there, but it was a fishing pond. There's Melanie again. You can see there she's got on this little outfit. I took some time up there to learn how to do all of these country woman kind of things. If you ever saw that movie Baby Boom, where the lady leaves her corporate job and moves out to the country, it was a lot like that for me. I was just like making the most of it. Learning what I could learn while we were up there. So I taught myself how to sew, and the lady next door helped me learn. And so I made some little outfits for Melanie, and just trying to assimilate into the culture up there and do what other people did. So needless to say, sewing was not my thing. I had to do more things over than I actually completed, and I just got frustrated with it. And again, back then there was no YouTube to jump on and, how do you do this and how do you do that and have somebody show you. You bought a book and learned, or you got somebody to help you. Okay, so we had chickens, and we'd go out and collect the eggs every day when they were laying. And of course, everybody up there had chickens, so everybody had way too many eggs. You couldn't even sell the eggs because everybody had them. And so after a while, it was like way too many eggs because you can't do a whole lot with eggs. You can't really freeze them. But I made a lot of pound cakes, and we had a lot of omelets and stuff like that. So that was really fun. And then that's my brother there, and he brought his kids up. All my siblings brought their kids to, visit the farm, and, showing them the chickens, and letting the others in the family have that experience too. So yeah, that's me in the middle there, looking very young. And uh, um, so that was fun when the family would come to visit, and we could show them all the farm stuff. And we had a garden. That's Melanie and Mitchell out there in the garden, and sunflowers would grow 10 feet tall, and we grew everything. The biggest lesson there was just because you have a lot of acreage doesn't mean you need to put a huge garden out there, because it is a lot of work, especially when things all come in at one time and you are out there, you've got to do something with it. So I never realized how much work goes into having a garden. And it was it was fun, but it was a lot of work when you're, canning tomatoes. I learned how to do that. We did green beans, we did cucumbers and made pickles, we grew some corn. We tried everything. So we had that experience of growing our own food, and the amount of work that's involved in that was just all new to us. So we also did a lot of berry picking. We had berry picking farms all over the place up there. We had apple trees on our own property, and there's Melanie, helping herself to just a few blueberries that we picked one day. So that was a lot of fun. And one year we grew pumpkins. We actually leased out the land, and the farmers came in and did all the work, and we watched all the pumpkins grow. So that was a lot of fun, going out there and watching the pumpkins grow and picking them ourselves and all that kind of stuff. So great experience there. And of course, the fishing. We taught the kids how to fish, and that was a fun nightly activity every evening in the summer. We'd walk down to the pond and do a little fishing and just enjoy being out there. So there's Mitchell with a young calf. So the kids were used to being around animals, and they understood a lot about that at a very young age. So I was very thankful for the whole experience of living up there and just learning this way of life, because it's one thing to visit a farm for a weekend or do a bed and breakfast or something, but when you live up there, it's very different. It's hard to get away, especially if you have acreage and livestock. You've got to figure out who's going to take care of all that while you're gone. So you really are very tied to your property and whatever you've got going on. It's very hard to get away. So here's one last thing I learned all about was cooking. I learned how to make yeast bread, and I really threw myself into the whole cooking thing because we had all of the fresh ingredients right there to make everything. I made blueberry cobbler like every night in the summer, and blackberry cobbler. It was all so delicious. This was homemade yeast cinnamon rolls. So I was really proud of myself for learning how to do all that, because in my family, when I was raised, I wasn't taught any of that. We were city people. We always lived in a subdivision, and never on more than maybe a third of an acre with a little yard. And so it was very different to be out there in the country with all this space, and you know learn how to do all of these things on my own, because my mom didn't teach me how to sew. She didn't know how. She didn't teach me really how to cook. I had to learn by myself. So that was just an interesting experience. But I said all of that to say, I get it. When you live in a rural area, it's very different than in the city. More, maybe a little easier these days with modern technology and being more connected with the internet and mobile phones and that kind of thing, but it's a hard life. It can be very challenging, especially if you're trying to build an eBay business. So let's go through some sourcing options if you are in a rural area, some things that you may not have thought of or just didn't know. First is going to be online options. So first thing you can do is buy lots on eBay and then sell all the items separately or in smaller lots. So what happens here is a lot of the turn and burn sellers will do auctions because they have so much inventory and not enough time to list everything individually. What happens here is when people do estate sale buyouts or garage sale buyouts, they will create lots, and they just don't have time to go through every single item and put it up for sale. So there may be some things mixed in there that are pretty profitable. And what you can do is go on eBay and search for junk drawer lots. I actually have a video about how to do that. And you can go through those items and either create different lots or sell the items individually. So it's kind of like you get this box in the mail with all this stuff in it, and you can go through it at your leisure and list items as you wish. And if you have junk left over, you can just redonate it. This is a great strategy for things like costume jewelry, eyeglasses, smalls, things that are lightweight and cheap to ship. So it's not going to cost you a lot of money. But the beauty of this is that it's shipped to your door and you have time to go through everything and look it up and sell it in a different way, whether it's on eBay, Poshmark, a Facebook group, your local consignment store, whatever. But this is one way you can get inventory, because I guarantee you that things are going to slip through, and the sellers offering these lots, they don't have time to look at every single thing. It's just a matter of they keep it going with a turn and burn kind of strategy for their business. And you can come along and go through the items more carefully and see what's in there. Another thing you can do is shop Goodwill auctions online. So Goodwill does have a website where they have auctions. And this is another case of they cannot know what everything is worth. They have so much stuff to list. A lot of times they'll just start everything off like here at $9.99. This brand is Eileen Fisher, which I routinely sell for $30 to $50 depending on what it is. So Goodwill can't know everything. They don't have time to research every single item. They probably have a business model where they just start everything at one price, depending on the category, and see what happens. And these are auctions, so they're very short term listings that aren't out there for a long time. So if you're buying items one by one to resell, you want to make sure that the final price plus the shipping is going to work to flip it on eBay. And for example, maybe you get one of these Eileen Fisher items for $10, shipping is $5, so your investment is $15. But if you can flip it for $50, then that works. And if you're new to this, it takes a little time to get a feel for it. So give it some time, keep practicing, keep trying, and eventually you will win things you can flip for a good profit. This is also a great strategy if you're disabled and you just can't get out to shop for things, but you can work on your computer. That is a very common situation these days, especially with our aging population, people having knee surgery, hip replacements, all these things that happen where it kind of knocks you out of life for a little while. But you can still do this and have things shipped to your door to resell. Another site you can use is estatesales.net. Now, this site does have a marketplace, but most items are local pickup and most are furniture, so not really going to apply to eBay. But what you can do is find sales that are upcoming in your area and preview what's for sale so that you don't waste your time driving around to these estate sales. You already know what's going to be there. You can get an idea of what you want to buy before you even go. So you can go online here and choose a particular sale that you might be interested in, and then you can look at the items individually, get the details. Like you can see here that there is some information on the back of these Wedgwood items. You can get that information, check comps on eBay. You can be prepared before you ever even go to the estate sale. Have some items in mind that you want to buy, and then it's not just a matter of willy-nilly driving around hoping that you're going to happen on an estate sale one day. You'll have a plan. Another thing you can do is to snipe auctions on eBay. Now, there are tools that can help you do this. One that I use is called Gixxon, and you're basically sniping auctions, which means you're not bidding on them until they're just about to end, and you're using this tool to put in your bid for you. This is a little bit more than I can explain in this video because it's a process, but I do have a 75-minute course in the premium library that explains exactly how to snipe auctions on inventory to resell. And this is another great option if you are disabled or a caregiver and you just can't get out to get inventory. You've got to do it online. There are a lot of different strategies you can do to find misspelled auctions or other listings on eBay that are presented badly. You buy the item, you present it better, and you have flipped that same item for more money than you bought it for. So you can check out that course. And then another thing is Inventory Connect. You've heard me mention this as a way to buy clothing and other inventory from experienced sellers that have picked this inventory knowing that they're going to sell it in reseller lots to other sellers who, for whatever reason, either can't go out and get inventory, are in a rural area, they don't have these options, or you just want to buy inventory from somebody who's experienced and knows how to pick it. So you can check out that video about that service. Now, as far as local options that you might not have thought of if you live out in a rural area, you've got local auctions, and maybe you don't even know how to find these. Well, there are websites for that. One is called Auction Zip. You can put in your zip code, the radius of how far out you want to go, what kinds of items you're looking for, or even keywords. And you can find local auctions to buy stuff to resell. There have been several interviews with different resellers on my YouTube channel that do this. They go to these local auctions, and it's just something you have to learn how to do. So I encourage you to check this out, try it, just go and watch. You don't have to buy anything just because you're there, but this is a good option if you don't have a lot of stores in your area. And usually what happens at these auctions is it's estate sale leftovers, stuff like that, that may get auctioned off in box lots. And I do recall Tammy, who is the nurse that works the night shift, she actually gets her inventory this way. This is one of the main ways she gets it. And she gets some great stuff, things that sell for over $100 that she hardly pays anything for. So I'll link to that video and you can watch that again. But local auctions are definitely something to check out. And then you've got local consignment stores. Maybe in the towns around you, you've got some of the national chains like Plato's Closet or Uptown Cheapskate. Those are national chains. And just check these out. Go to them and ask questions. Find out, do they have any special sales? Can you get on an email list where you're notified of sales? Or do they have coupons? Or do they have seasonal clearance? And these aren't just clothing, it's accessories, it's shoes, there's other things in there, men's and women's. So that could be a good option if your thrift stores are priced too high or you're just not seeing good stuff in your thrift stores. You might want to check out some of these consignment stores, and even the independently owned ones often have great stuff, which is a good segue into the next tip, number 8, consignment store clearance. This is a great way to get inventory and something I do a few times a year, even in a non-rural area. But if you think about it, consignment stores have limited floor space. So they've got to keep their inventory moving. They can't let it sit there for very long. They want items that are on trend and in the current season. And they've got a steady flow of incoming merchandise. So there's a lot of turnover of inventory in that store. And, their limitations are our opportunities. Because when a consignment store has end of season clearance or ongoing clearance, in the back somewhere in a clearance section, That's an opportunity for us to get stuff cheap to resell. And I love consignment store clothing, especially because it's already on trend. They've already approved it to have it put in their store. It's usually clean, doesn't have any stains on it. Everything's been checked. The zippers work, all of that. It's in better condition than what you would find in a thrift store because these stores are in business for profit. So whoever is approving the clothing to be put on consignment has looked it over really well, and they require the items to be clean and in really good condition to even accept them. Do I still wash it when I get it home? Yes, I do. But the bottom line is that it's going to be in better condition than something just donated to a thrift store that's just put out on the floor and nobody's even looked it over. So you've got that going for you. Also, consignment stores, a lot of them are on Facebook now, and they will advertise when they're having their specials. So, like this came up on my feed a couple of weeks ago, showing that they're doing their summer clearance and how much everything's going to be. So, if you follow them on social media, you can stay informed of sales and clearance. And when I go to these dollar days, end of season sales at consignment stores, I usually buy 50 to 80 items because it's so cheap and I'm shipping internationally, so it doesn't matter if the seasons are off. And we already know that there are no seasons on eBay. Summer sells in the winter, winter sells in the summer, it doesn't matter. So this is a great way to stock up on items that are in great condition and that are brands that are on trend that people want. And sometimes they'll only do it, a few times a year. Other stores may have ongoing clearance all the time. You just have to go check that out. So you can do a Google search for consignment stores in my area, go on Facebook and just put that in, consignment stores in my area, local consignment stores, and you can find where they are and if it makes sense for you to go there. Okay, the next thing you might want to consider are buyout deals. And just remember, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So you have to be a little aggressive here. And if you hear no, you hear no. But I have done this when I have stumbled upon things that it was a large number of a certain kind of item or a lot of things on clearance. So when you see something that can be an opportunity, go ask for a buyout deal. What is an opportunity? Clearance on a large number of items. So say you walk into one of these consignment stores and they're having their end of season clearance and everything is $1 on that rack over there. You say, hey, how much for all of it? And see if they'll give you a deal. Or if you see multiples of the same item, like somebody donated 4 cases of water filters or something, go ask how much for all of that. That would be great because it's repeatable. If it's end of the season items, now your smaller stores, your more independently owned stores, garage sales, thrift stores, those kind of places are going to be more willing to deal with you. Places like Kohl's, they're not going to make you a deal. You've got to be able to get to the person who's the decision maker and has the authority to give you a deal. There was a place I used to go to near where I live called Cherokee Closeouts, and it was just that. It was closeouts from stores all over the place. And I could go in there and negotiate. So you have to find the person who has the authority to do that. And usually your national chains are not going to negotiate with you. But you could do this at garage sales, live auctions, and it would be ideal if it was something repeatable. So let's say you've got a consignment store, independently owned, and 4 times a year they do a big clearance sale. Well, what do they do with all their leftovers that nobody buys? Get on that list, have them call you. I was helping a seller in New York who was in a rural area, and she actually did this with several different consignment stores in her area, where she was the person they called to take all the rest after clearance time was over. And she would negotiate a deal and she would go get all of it. And that's how she got her inventory. So it's just a matter of not being afraid to ask. What do you say? You just go up to the manager and say, hey, let's make a deal. You got to be Monty Hall. You've got to say, hey, I'd like to find out about buying all of whatever it is. Would you consider a deal? And, if you hear no, you hear no. But the answer is always going to be no if you don't ask. So you've got to figure out creative solutions for your sourcing challenges, and it just means you have to be a little bit more aggressive. Okay, the last one is road trip. You may have to plan a road trip to a place where thrifting is better. And Suzanne explains this really well in her success story video, which I will put a link to. She lives in rural Montana, and she explains how she goes on these sourcing trips for 2 or 3 days at a time and hits a whole bunch of stores in different towns. And it is a business expense because that's the purpose of the trip, is going to buy things to resell. So you can deduct your lodging, meals, your other travel expenses. Of course, you're going to want to consult your CPA about this, but you can do that. If you have to travel somewhere to get things to resell, then that's a business trip. So just keep that in mind. Okay, well, I hope that information has helped you and you enjoyed my backstory about my rural living experience. But I think the 6 years we lived out in the country like that gave me a very deep appreciation for people who live out in the country and have the challenges of it takes so long to get anywhere. When you have to be away, you plan everything out. You don't just jump in the car and run to the store to get a loaf of bread. You have to plan it out when the store is 30 miles away. So I feel for you folks that live out in rural areas. There's definitely pros and cons to everything, but if you think creatively and plan it out, you can figure out ways to get inventory to resell. I would love your comments if you are in a rural area, if I have forgotten anything in this video. And I hope these tips will help some of you that hadn't thought of these ideas, because you can be successful on eBay. It just takes a little bit more planning and creativity. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.